Ever had that weird, nagging pain on the pinky side of your wrist? You know the one. It's super common, but man, it can be a real puzzle to figure out. Well, today, we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to crack the case of ulnar-sided wrist pain, clue by clue. Let's get this investigation started. So this is the big mystery, right? Why does it hurt over there? It could be anything from a torn ligament to tendinitis to arthritis. And what makes it so incredibly tricky is that all the potential culprits are crammed into this tiny, really complex space. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote right here from a medical journal really says it all. This isn't just tough for us, it's a well-known headache for doctors too. It's notoriously difficult to diagnose, and that's because the anatomy itself just makes the whole investigation that much harder. I want you to imagine a tiny, bustling city block. You've got bones, ligaments, tendons, nerves, and arteries, all living literally on top of each other. So when something goes wrong in that crowded neighborhood, figuring out which building the problem is actually coming from, well, it requires a very, very systematic approach. So, where does any good detective start? With the witness account, of course. And in this case, the most important witness is you. Your story. Your personal history provides the first and, honestly, the most crucial set of clues. So a doctor's going to start asking questions that might seem simple, but every single answer you give is a lead. For example, was there a sudden injury? That points toward a tear or maybe a fracture. Does the pain get worse when you twist something? That suggests instability. And any clicking or snapping? That is a huge clue that something is catching or moving out of place. And the investigation goes deeper than just the pain itself. Are you right-handed or left-handed? What do you do for a living? Work at a computer all day, or are you a carpenter? Do you play tennis or golf? These little details about your life, they're not just small talk. They reveal patterns of repetitive stress that can point the finger directly at the cause. Okay, so once your story is established, it's time to visit the scene of the crime, the physical exam. This is where the detective starts gathering that hard physical evidence directly from the source. They're building the case with every single touch. A good examiner is incredibly methodical. They'll start just by looking, comparing your injured wrist to your healthy one. Then comes palpation. That's where they'll carefully press on very specific spots to try and pinpoint the exact source of the pain. And finally, they'll check your range of motion and just make sure all the nerves and arteries are doing their job. Now, here's where things get really clever. Provocative tests. These are special movements and stresses that the doctor applies to your wrist. And the goal is simple: to make the suspect, whether that's a ligament, a tendon, or a joint, reveal itself by recreating your specific pain in a controlled way. Now, these tests get graded in two ways: sensitivity and specificity. Think of it like fishing. A sensitive test is like casting a great big net. If you pull that net up and it's empty, you can be pretty darn sure there are no fish there, which is great for ruling things out. A specific test, on the other hand, is like a spear. You might miss a few fish, but if you hit one, you know exactly what you've caught. That helps you rule a specific diagnosis in. Doctors use both to narrow down the search. So here are a few examples of what those look like. The ulnocarpal stress test. That's the wide net. It just tells the doctor, yep, the problem is generally over here on the ulnar side. But a test like the ECU synergy test, that's way more specific. It's designed to isolate and test one single structure, in this case, a tendon. Every test helps the detective cross another suspect off the list. All right, so after we've gathered the witness statements and the physical evidence, it's time to bring in the high-tech forensic tools. Imaging lets us look right inside the wrist to see what's really going on. But this is not a shot in the dark. The choice of imaging is totally guided by the clues we've already collected. If a bone issue is suspected, you start with an X-ray. If it seems like a tendon thing, an ultrasound might be best because you can actually watch the tendon move in real time. And an MRI, that's the gold standard for getting a super detailed look at soft tissues like ligaments and the triangular fibrocartilage complex, or TFCC, a really key stabilizer in there. Now, one of the most critical things an X-ray can show is something called ulnar variance. It sounds complicated, but it's just asking a simple question. Is your ulna, that's the bone on your pinky side, a little bit longer or shorter than the radius next to it? It seems like such a minor detail, but trust me, the consequences can be huge. Get this, when the ulna is just 2.5 millimeters longer than the radius, that's tiny. It can increase the force on that side of your wrist by up to 40%. That tiny little difference in your anatomy can lead to major problems down the line. It's a perfect example of how one small clue can have a massive impact on the case. But here's a crucial warning from the experts. Technology isn't everything. It is entirely possible to have something show up on an MRI that isn't actually causing you any pain at all. It's just an incidental finding. So the forensic evidence from the scan absolutely must match your story and the physical exam to be considered the true culprit. Okay, we have the witness statement, we have the physical evidence, the forensic reports are in. Now it's time for the final step, putting all the pieces of this puzzle together to finally solve the mystery. So to organize all this information, clinicians often use these really clever mental models. One of the best is called the three-story model. It just divides the ulnar side of the wrist into three distinct zones, kind of like floors in a building, to help organize all the possibilities. By pinpointing which story the pain is coming from, that huge list of potential diagnoses gets much, much smaller. So if the pain is near the base of your hand, that's the upper story. It might be arthritis. If it's right around that bony bump you can feel, the ulnar styloid, the intermediate story, you start thinking about a tear in that key piece of cartilage, the TFCC. And if it's a little further down your forearm, the lower story, it could be instability in the distal radio-ulnar joint, or DRUJ. And one last key distinction is this. Are your symptoms static or dynamic? In other words, is the pain always there, just this constant ache? That suggests something like arthritis. Or does it only show up when you twist a doorknob or lift a heavy pan? That points to a dynamic problem, something that's unstable and only causes trouble during certain movements. So there you have it. The path to a real diagnosis isn't a single test or just a lucky guess. It is a methodical investigation. It starts with your story. It's guided by a hands-on exam, it's confirmed with the right kind of imaging, and it's all synthesized using smart frameworks to finally crack the case. By understanding this whole process, you're no longer just a patient with some mysterious pain. You're the lead witness in your own medical detective story. So the final question is, now that you're armed with all this knowledge, what clues might your own wrist be giving you?